Hello, Paul. Thank you for being here today to talk about your animation in general. So, what you do, what you make, how you make it. First of all, can you maybe talk a bit about yourself, what you do in animation, design, just what you create in general?
Nice. Yeah. My name's Paul. I'm an artist based in Florida. I do a lot of short films and little mini series that I'm working on with my wife. We do that as personal projects. And then for work, we're traveling caricature artists, so we travel all across the US doing caricatures at different festivals and events. And it's kind of influenced our style to be more cartoony and like exaggerated, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, because I discovered what you do with your Instagram page. So I've seen animation first, and then I discovered the rest of what you do. But I guess it's the other way around. You probably made animation a bit later than drawing. So what's a bit of your journey regarding drawing, making characters?
Yeah, I've always loved drawing ever since I was little. Um, Trying to remember what the first inspiration was, but it was either Nightmare Before Christmas or Wallace and Gromit.
Hmm.
I started doing animation, doing claymation actually.
Oh yeah,
Uh, Before I even got into like 2D hand-drawn animation, I just always wanted to create cartoons. And then I would say I started that around 8. And then around 12, it was when I bought my first computer and I was able to get a really old version of Flash,
hmm.
Macromedia Flash 8. And that's kind of how I started my journey into 2D animation. And
I
then
guess
ever since
Flash was so much a big influence for many animators because that's like the 2010 internet with many different kind of
oh
indie
yeah, it
animation,
was dominated by
different styles.
Flash
Yeah, yeah,
animation.
yeah. So you
So
made animation since a young age. I thought you it was a bit later because animation can be a bit mystical for when you're young. It's
oh yeah.
either you make a sketchbook or you animate Lego, but claymation is a bit more advanced, I guess.
It wasn't the best claymation, admittedly, but it was still claymation and it still piqued my interest in animation. So yeah, I always loved that. I definitely one day want to get back into. I want to make a claymation film one day, but until then, I'm happy doing the 2D. I feel like
Mhm.
my drawing skills are better than my sculpting skills.
Nice. And how did you discover Callipeg? It was a few years ago, I guess, where I watched your first animations.
Yeah, I had a few friends actually recommend it. I'm always looking at all these softwares, trying to see what works with like my workflow and
Hmm.
like uh, I'm really into like the UI of programs too, like the layout of them. And some programs are clunkier than others, but my friends directed me towards Callipeg. And when I used it, it just reminded me of like when I first started doing 2D animation and like just like all the fun I had and how like I could just jump into it and not worry about like the program and all the menus.
Hmm.
So it just worked perfect with how I work.
Thank you. So I've seen some animation you made where you mix also the media. So you work in CG and 2D, CG for the
Oh,
background. So is it something you try to often make, mixing the techniques? Do you have a
oh,
result in mind and then you just do anything you can to achieve it?
definitely, yeah. It's actually a technique I saw they use in like anime. Like it's a pretty popular
Mhm.
technique to like use CG as like a base and then kind of amplify it with your 2D animation. So I thought like, oh, let me give that a shot because I was always not anti 3D, but I was always more drawn towards the 2D.
Yeah.
And once I figured out that you could mix them like that really well, I was like, that's a game changer. So I definitely started playing more into that recently and like getting more into 3D, helping the 2D.
We might go into details on the project you made using the techniques, but I wanted to know a bit further about what the challenges you face when you make 2D animation. Because for me, for example, I struggle often with my drawing skills themselves. So just having the ability to draw the volume and so on, and you make also some action scenes. So that's to me it's pretty ambitious. So what's the challenges you face when you do that?
I feel like the ambition catches up to me a lot of times. I have these big ideas in my head, so I'm trying to execute them, but they take way longer than I expect.
Yeah.
So the challenge is time management, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to.
Mhm.
That's always a tough one. Time management for sure. And the drawing skills too, like just like keeping that form and like making the drawings dynamic, especially in an action scene where it's a little more quick paced, like that's always the challenge. So I feel like the 3D has helped in some aspects, like with the
Mhm.
perspective and keeping things more in form. So that's another reason why I've been trying to implement it more because it is helping me understand perspective and like staging out the characters better. Because I feel like if you look at some of my older work, it's like very in the face of the character, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas now, like I'm able to spread it out a little more and like
And
share the screen with more characters.
yeah, that's one of the big deals in animation. In 2D, also the interaction between characters. And regarding your drawing skills, do you have a classical background? Did you make some anatomy studies or a lot of people sketching, or were you mostly influenced by the more stylized and never really touch with realism?
Actually, there was a point where I was doing animation, and then I realized my drawing skills weren't the strongest. And I know with 2D animation in particular, your drawing skills really matter.
Yeah.
So, uh, I took a break with animation for a little in high school and like really focused on like portraits and like more like learning form and like keeping things proportionate and like the rendering aspects. And I just wanted to learn the fundamentals. That
Mhm.
way, when I come back to animation, I had more of a base, I guess, like a foundation than just like there's nothing wrong with just going at it, but the foundations really did help me
Yeah.
get to where.
Because that's kind of a cliche also, but we need to have some kind of base not really anatomy itself, because it's not about all the muscles and bones and so on,
Mhm.
but about the figure, and then we can stylize, because we often start as a stylization, but we don't know how to make a nice volume. But it's also nice to start with copying stuff, so it's not a linear way into making drawing and animation. It's always a kind of a struggle to me, at least, because I do think with references, things just from head, and then I struggle and I have to make something else. So that's not really a question, but just about the struggle of making animation. And what is your main project at the moment? Because you say that you have different short films. In
Yeah.
do you have
So
several at the same time, or just you go from one to another when it is
so
finished?
yeah, so it's always like a bouncing thing. I'll so I have a couple going at the moment. So I
Okay.
had the one I was working on last year, the one that you saw with the 3D and the 2D,
Hmm.
and that one got a little too ambitious, way too quick. So it was originally supposed to be like 6 minutes. It ended up turning into like 18 after like I added more to it and like really developed the story. So it was just growing way too quick, and like there was still a lot of things I wanted to learn before I like, fully committed
Hmm.
to that one. And it didn't make sense to learn it during an 18-minute film.
Yeah.
So we're kind of me and my wife started a new short film that is based on like an old animation I did. Like we're reworking it into like a story and stuff. That one's supposed to be like 5 minutes.
Hmm.
So a little more manageable, a little more where we can just focus more on the animation instead of like being bogged down by like all the like overwhelming nature of the 18
Yeah.
minutes the other film was. And then with this one, it was about learning how to break up the scenes into smaller chunks because
Hmm.
I would make the scenes like 2 minute like chunks that we had to clean up, and it was just getting too overwhelming, and it didn't really make sense.
Just one shot, very long.
Yeah, exactly. I
Okay.
was
Okay.
like putting multiple shots into one because I was kind of I don't know, I just wasn't breaking them up appropriately. So
Mhm.
with this one, I've just been learning more about like breaking up scenes and making it more manageable so that we can finish it at a better rate. So just kind of learning more of like what works better for us.
Okay. And what's your different roles in the production of a short film? Do you have specific parts each of you do?
Oh yeah. So I try to usually I'll like break them apart just based on like what our strengths are.
Hmm.
So I usually like am stronger at doing the action, like the more like choreographed scenes where there's like more actions going on and like more characters involved. And then she's usually better at like more like intimate, like character acting moments. So like
Yeah.
I'll try to throw that her way. But then like I don't want to just give her all one type of scene and then me one type of scene. So I try to like I'll take a few of those character acting and then I'll give her some of those fight scenes. That way we're still getting familiarized with our like not weaknesses, but our like what we're lacking in. But then we can still focus on our strengths to get this project done quick in a more speedily fashion.
Yeah, because it takes a long time to make a short
Oh,
film, even it's only 5 minutes with a big
yeah.
quote, you know?
Yeah, it's still gonna take a while, but definitely quicker than 18 minutes, admittedly.
Yeah. And so how do you manage that? Do you um, have some part of your time really dedicated to that, or it's only when you can? Because you say that you are a traveling caricature artist. So is it a job you make? I don't know how to say that, but is it full time and you are always on events, or do you have some weeks where you just can work on the short film?
Yeah, so there's a lot of times where we're traveling for long periods of time, but then there's a lot of downtime where we have like a couple weeks, maybe a month off where we can just like really full force focus on
Hmm.
the on our animation projects and whatever else, what other personal projects we want to work on. But yeah, and then even when are working, like we'll try to dedicate like maybe like an hour if we can to work on it. So it's just as much as we can do it, that's what we're trying to like put into it.
And do you manage to not be bored of the same project because it's uh, so long without being full time on it? So it can be a bit difficult to stay focused when you just work a few hours a week on a during 2 years or so.
Even then it still gets a little overwhelming, but it just trying to find the fun in it helps a lot too. Like that's what we've been trying to like focus more on because like there was a period where it does like feel like work, even though it's like
Mhm.
a personal passion project that we really want to make, it still sometimes feels like work. So just like trying to make it more fun, like, just trying to like imbue more jokes into it and like
Yeah.
make sillier expressions and, even if it's a more not serious but more dramatic film, like we'll still try to imbue the comedy because that's what makes it more fun for us, like drawing the
Mhm.
silly expressions and like the over the top fights. So yeah, just like it's a struggle, but I love the struggle. So
That's part of the job.
oh yeah.
Even if it's not a professional job that we are paid for, we
Oh yeah.
have to take it as a job to make it right, I guess.
Yeah, otherwise I don't think it'll ever get done. But
Mhm.
that's why. So sometimes you gotta not force yourself, but like you gotta push yourself a little harder than other days for sure.
Mhm. And just before we watch some of your work, can we talk about the tools you use? Because you use Callipeg for animation, but what do you use also other tools? What is your pipeline? Is it only mobile or not? That kind of thing.
When we're on the road, we try to keep it as mobile as possible. So Callipeg, there's a compositing program on the iPad called LumaFusion.
Hmm.
So we'll use that for like quick editing. Um, Usually we'll have like a Surface, like the Surface laptop with us
Yeah.
on the go. So we'll have like Audacity for the sound design, and then if if I have a little more time, I'll try to use After Effects. But admittedly, like I really got to sit down and use that one.
Mm.
So that's why we try to keep it more like on the mobile side. That way we don't have to like really like split it up between multiple devices. But those are the main programs. And then Procreate for like backgrounds and Blender for the 3D.
Yeah. So everything that can be the most pocketable possible, and Blender is also a very light way to use
Oh
and so
yeah,
on. So
compared to other software, yeah,
mhm.
definitely.
And you don't go into complex complex CGI. I think it's only like the basics, some blocking and so on, but you don't have to make some heavy rendering, that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
stuff. Mm.
Yeah, it's a lot of low poly. Like that's what I try to gear towards. That way, like for one, it saves the hard drive because
Mm.
like I feel like the more polygons you add, like the more like the rendering takes longer pretty much. So I try to keep it simpler and then I'll paint backgrounds and like impose it on the 3D model. That way like a lot of the details through the drawing as opposed to the modeling itself. And then just rely more on the drawing skills to like sell the 3D.
Yeah. So speaking of drawing, maybe we can see a bit of some work you did. So you can
Oh
just
yeah.
so that's how I discovered your work, I guess.
Oh
The
yeah, with the
very
3D.
dynamic and camera moving, because it's nice also to test that kind of scene, because I think it looks really complex, but it's the moving camera adds some complexity, but it's not really complex as a 2D scene. I don't know if I'm right.
Yeah, like at least for this particular one, yeah, more of the heavy lifting is done with the 3D
Mhm.
in regards to like the camera movement, like the overall movement of the characters. But the 2D, what I like about the 2D is that you add more like fluidity and more character to the models. So like if I just like uh made the characters invisible right now and it was just the 3D models you were
Mhm.
watching, the movement's more rigid. Uh there's a lot less pizzazz, I guess, to it. And where like once I have the 3D base, the 2D allows me to like play around with like how it looks and like just make it more fun, pretty
Mhm.
much.
So
And
that's
then
part of the longer short film. That's it.
yeah, yeah. So this is one of the earlier fights in the short film. So it's more like when the bar fight erupts. So
Mhm.
like uh, uh, eventually the background will be filled with like a crowd of people, I'm hoping, but for now it's just like the main characters fighting it out.
And so you started with the 3D, or you made a storyboard already in 2D.
Yeah, so I had the storyboard in 2D. It was a little more simple. And then I started like blocking it out with the 3D. And I was like, what if I play with the combat more? Because
Mhm.
the combat was more simplistic in my storyboard. I was still like learning more how to like choreograph like fight scenes. So the 3D really helped me add more movement and more like just more in general to the
Yeah.
fight scene. So it just from there kind of built. So like I guess if I like storyboarded it true to the if I animated it true to the storyboard, it would be a little shorter and less dynamic than it actually ended up being.
That's also the main advantage in 3D, is that you can play with the camera movement, make a blocking, make some quick animation, and you find angles you wouldn't have imagined in 2D, because we are limited by our own vision and drawing skills. So sometimes we just stick to what we know, and with a 3D background and 2D animation, I think we can be a bit more creative, a bit more quickly also.
Oh yeah, it's definitely helped me like I'll actually go back and like refine storyboards based after I like build the 3D sets because I'm like, oh man, this angle's so much cooler than what I
Mm.
originally had planned out. So you're right, yeah, it definitely like gives me like more possibilities than I could think on my own. And so it's like I'm learning from it, but I'm also like using it to my advantage to like make I'm just trying to use every trick in the book to make my
Yeah.
films look good as possible. But this is the storyboard with the 2D 3D comparison. So like a little more dynamic in the original for sure. But I still try to keep it as true to the storyboards.
Mhm. In terms of timing, mostly just
Yeah.
to be sure that every cut is nice in the sequence.
Oh yeah. And then with the 3D as well, it actually helps me draw the characters better. Like I get to do more like cool angles with it because now I get to see these cool angles. So a lot of times I'll take the character and do like a really rough mock-up of them in 3D. That way I can kind of like position them all throughout
Mhm.
the 3D environment and just kind of like play around with more dynamic angles and stuff.
And regarding the design of the characters, because you make caricatures of people also, but
Yeah.
it's really not the same exercise because caricatures of people is not exaggerated poses. It's always quite the same angle, I guess. So how do you manage to work on more different posing and having some strong characters in your animation?
Um, it helps that my wife draws really good.
Yeah.
Like that always helps like imbue more like because her style is like more exaggerated than mine. So
Okay.
it like we'll do a lot of back and forth. So I'll have like these initial ideas and I'll do like a sketch that I think is good. And I'm like, hey, here, take this and see if you can make it better. And it always comes back better.
Hmm.
And then it's just a lot of back and forth, just kind of like playing with it and then it helps that like some characters like will use like friends or family's inspiration. So like that helps like add the character to it. So we know how to like make them look sillier and then uh yeah, just like stretching like because caricature is about like stretching reality and like exaggerating it and like
Hmm.
just like having that as like practice on daily because of the nature of our work. It's kind of helped us think in a more exaggerated and pushed like mindset. So that helps like really push the characters as far as we can.
And do you also
With
make
their
some
lines.
do you make some model sheets and turn around and
Oh yeah, we try to do as many as we can for like as many characters as we can, but we know it would take a long time to do for every character,
Mhm.
so kind of like restrict the turnarounds and like the expression sheets and all that mainly for like the main cast, and then we'll try to do like try to get most of the views just to really get the angles right, but that's where 3D has helped actually too. Like, because sometimes like some of these characters are so wild that it's harder to see certain angles in your head or
Mm.
certain like views of them in your head. So having that 3D where I can like mock it out really helps us like make stronger turnaround sheets and stuff. So that's kind of helped us like keep the characters more consistent, but still
Yeah.
fun in our like projects.
Because with very exaggerated characters, we have some challenges about the angles. Because I have an example in a French film, animated film called Sirocco, and it was a bird with a long beak like this. I think it's a beak we call that,
Mhm.
and they didn't draw uh, full front angle because it's strange. You can see the eyes and just a line, and it's strange. So you have to define that in the character design. So I can see here you have also some long uh, birdie beaks and so on. So do you have also to manage that to have always an angle that's watchable in a way, and that's not just a strange perspective?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because like the main villain group in this particular short film it's they're called the Crane Gang. So it's
Mhm.
just a gang of cranes. And so yeah, that frontal angle is really strange because it's just like a little triangle almost or like a
Yeah.
little V, like so we try to cheat it by like not really using like there's gonna be points where you are gonna see the frontal, but we try to cheat it by like when they walk, they bounce, so it's always like a little bit three
Mhm.
quarters or a little bit skewed. Like that way we're never really drawing that frontal because I feel like it's hard to make look good and we'll be searching for a while like looking at different like cartoons and seeing like okay who does birds and what how
Yeah.
do they do their frontals and like I feel like a lot of people cheated a little by like turning it
Mhm.
slightly so it doesn't help that they're birds because it is more exaggerated with the frontal and stuff but
Yeah.
that it cheating it sometimes is the answer just like if you don't want to do a full frontal turn it or
Yeah, and also it helps with the silhouette work because if you don't if you have a front face for a bird, the silhouette is a bit lacky. So here I can see, for example, when it's with the wind open, the silhouette is so strong. It's just a few lines. So it's like that. And did you have some inspiration? I don't know, for example, Kung Fu Panda, that kind of stuff with animals fighting.
oh yeah, I love that movie so much. Kung Fu Panda. But No, for this one, it so I live in Florida, and what inspired the cranes actually was there's always they always travel in like pairs or like little
Mhm.
trios. So there's always a few of them like traveling together, and they're always like like they don't care who is near them. They'll just
Mhm.
like they'll cross the street, not caring if the cars come. Like if people walk by, they just kind of like stay there. So I thought it was a funny idea as well, just to
A
like
band,
make
yeah.
them like the villains of this. And then Florida is kind of like a giant swamp, so that's
Mm.
kind of what inspired the like the scenery and stuff and like the characters in this particular film.
And what's the story of this film? Because we didn't talk about it, I think.
So the story as of right now, because that was one of the things that like made me put this on hiatus, is that I wanted to fix the story a little.
Mm.
But the story so far is so there's a bartender. And one day the Crane Gang comes into the bar and like starts like wrecking havoc. And so uh, you kind of learn throughout the film that they've been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
And so he's tired of it. So he's finally gonna stand up to them. And it's not working out too well, like because he has no powers initially. So they're beating him up, and he's at the point where like he's on the verge of death, and so his powers awaken, and now he's finally able to like stand up for himself and like his community against them. And so yeah, the film's basically him against the Crane Gang, pretty much.
It makes me want to watch it more.
Thank you, thank you.
Maybe you can see a bit more of other shots because I know you have a few.
So this one is like heavily like this one's more rotoscoped with the 3D,
Yeah, for the
and that one.
perspective, very
Yeah,
particular. Mm.
for the cool, like I thought it was really cool to get close to the shotgun and then really like pull it out.
And you
So
play
yeah,
with the
that's
lenses
harder.
also, with the angle of the lens.
Oh yeah, and like that's harder to like get if I just did it like without the reference, like it. And then when I do clean it up, it'll be less jittery. So it's just more to like test it out and see how I felt about like the perspective and movement and everything. But I was pretty happy with this one, so uh, it was one of the earlier scenes where I realized that 3D would be more of an advantage for our project than like a hindrance.
So when you made the storyboard, you didn't know that you will use CG for the background.
Um, I had planned to do like very basic, like I would like my initial plan was I would just model it out, export like render out the one image and then
Mhm.
just kind of render on top of it in like Procreate or something, just kind of like paint over and like add more details and stuff. That way, like it would save us a little time on the backgrounds. But then, I watched more anime and like I was like, how did they do like an effect like that? So I started doing like a lot of research like on behind the scenes of like how they produce certain scenes or like how certain studios approach certain like projects. And I was like, I would like to add that. So this is one of the earlier scenes where I was like, let me just see, it doesn't hurt to at least try. And so when it came out like pretty stylish and dynamic, I was like, all right, this is the route I gotta go.
And I watched also the short film about Freddy versus Jason,
Oh
which is
yeah.
also a big piece of big scenes and dynamic angles and so on. So maybe we can show it a bit and talk about it.
Yeah, this one was a project I wanted to make for a while. Like I always wanted to animate these two fighting it out. So one day I was just like, we gotta do it. Not spend too much time on just to get a feel for everything. So we kind of try to make this as short as possible, like as short a time frame to make a project as possible. So I think we ended up taking 2.5 weeks on it,
Mhm.
just because we wanted to keep the production time quicker and just kind of like focus on just like general movement and like storyboarding. And I just wanted to play around more with like compositing and stuff.
So for that one, you because it was made before the current animation, what was the way you worked on it? What was it was the same tools you used for all the pipeline, or did you discover some way to work on animation and compositing during that finished project to for new ones, I guess. I
Um,
say.
so for this one, our so we had a couple goals. One was to see how quick we could do an animation and still make it polished enough that people could follow along.
Hmm.
So that was the primary goal. And then I really wanted to focus on just uh, the compositing aspect and like just kind of putting things together and like color grading. And so just kind of like learning how to put all the pieces together in a way that's like more stylish, I guess.
Hmm.
And then for this particular one, I think we ended up doing all the animation and background straight in Callipeg, and then just some like little detailing stuff at the end with Procreate for like the dust clouds and kind of figuring out like a quick because we have projects that we want to do quicker, like if we just do like fun little animations or like little loops or like just
Hmm.
like little like things that we can post online. Like we're just trying to figure out like a quicker process for that because the process for something like Freddy versus Jason was different than how we're approaching our current short films. Like it's a little more simplified, a little more like streamlined and fast paced, I guess.
Hmm.
We can bring some of that into our bigger projects because I feel like, especially when there's the two of us, like bigger projects are always going to take longer anyways. So
Yeah.
just kind of figuring out some tricks here and there to like speed things up is always a nice goal to have.
Hmm. I don't know if it's possible that we can see a bit of the animation itself and that you can tell a bit about how you animate, just
Oh
to
yeah,
show how you do the posing, the spacing, that kind of stuff.
because the short film we're working on is based on an older, like rough animation. Like the original inspiration for the one we're working on currently is I did a little fight scene that was like maybe a minute long,
Hmm.
and I was like, well, what if we take because I always wanted to make it into a full-fledged project, but I just at the time, this was like maybe 3 years ago, I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready to make that a full thing yet. So I just kind of sidelined it. But recently we brought it back. It's kind of been the inspiration to like really push this project forward. So I definitely, but I have
And
some of the older
that's also a
rough.
nice tip to just keep what you did somewhere and just go back, a few years later. And sometimes you just take an idea and it can make a new illustration, a new film, a new character. So don't lose anything. It can be useful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I was like, I don't want to just like scrap it all together. Like, I definitely want to use it someday. So, and then there's even like projects that I know I probably won't make for a long time because like there's other projects I want to focus on more.
Mm.
But I'll be like, oh, that was a cool action scene. Like, this would look really good in this short film too. So, sometimes just scrapping old like movement that you've done for previous projects or just kind of like reusing assets is always like an efficient way to save a little time, you know?
Yeah. So this film, what is the subject, the story of that new film?
It's three brothers who back in the day heard of something called the Holy Cola. Um, and they vowed to one day sneak into their mom's attic and drink it. So at the beginning of the film is the day that they decide to drink the Holy Cola. And so they each take a sip, and it's said to give anyone who drinks it the power of the gods.
Okay.
Um, but the oldest brother ends up being greedy and drink like he ends up drinking a majority of it. And so now they're kind of like the two brothers are at odds with their older brother for drinking a majority of the cola. Because he always does stuff like that. And so the whole film is just them like trying to get like revenge on him like betraying their pact to drink the cola together.
That's a cool story. It's
Yeah.
always a nice pitch to make us curious to see more.
Just try to make it sillier, you know, because the other projects tend to be more serious, and we're like, what if we make it a little more simple, a little more contained,
Mhm.
uh, and just focus on the over the top nature of it. Just play into our like exaggerated nature and stuff. And the title of the film is Brotrayal. This is like big transformation moment. So in the new storyboards, it's a little more like dynamic with the movement, but
So that's when he gets the power.
yeah, that's when he unlocks the full like power. And then the other brother's running towards him.
And how do you decide to animate to storyboard that particular scene? Do you do that in like the chronological order, or do you make an animatic for the scene you want to make at the moment?
Maybe it's like a super linear way of thinking, but I just do a chronological order. Like I'll just like start from the beginning and work my way to the end. And like part of me is like, maybe I should just skip to that scene and like work on that and then go back and rework things. But in my mind, I'm like, if something happens in the beginning, it might change the way this scene plays out. So I try to work, at least for me, it works better when I'm just going in chronological order and like seeing how things play out. Cause then maybe that scene works better earlier on, you know,
Mm.
or like maybe it doesn't play out that way at all. So for a scene like this, I waited till I got to this point where I knew that he was going to unlock his power and betray them, and now he's just transforming into this monster that they have to like get their revenge on.
So you do that also with the animation itself, not only the storyboard. You make all in chronological order, because I know some production make, for example, the very difficult ones at first to make sure that it's good, and then the more simple one to go faster on them. So it depends on the production, I guess. But
Yeah, so for the story side, that one I like play around with things more, and like I don't necessarily do that in chronological order, but when it comes to the storyboards, because um I guess I lay out the story more in like certain plot beats, beats, like story beats, and then from there I'll be like, okay, what would be a cool scene that would like represent this beat, and then I'll storyboard that out. So I guess in that regard, like the storyboard will be chronological because like I don't necessarily plan out the scenes shot for shot. I'm like doing that as I'm storyboarding. But when I'm writing the story, yeah, I'll play around with that more, and like maybe I'll write the ending first and then go back to the beginning. So it's a lot of back and forth with the story side of writing, but it's also because I'm a stronger artist than I am writer, and I'm trying to like work more on my writing skills. So that was another thing for this particular project. Like, um, I for this particular project, I realized that I definitely have to put the same amount of care and time as I do for other aspects of it. Because like I noticed with other projects, I'm always giving the most love to the animation and
mm,
character design, whereas um, with this project, I was like, nah, I have to dedicate that much time to every aspect of this. Otherwise, it'll be like all style, no substance, you know?
yeah, and we also have to balance with the level we have when we do the animation, because if we work on a short film for 1 year, 2 years, we improve, and it doesn't have to show in the film itself. So that's a challenge also to keep to your art direction, even if you change the bit the way you do, because you can't just have something changing in the middle.
Oh yeah. And that was a problem with the other film, the one with the bartender and the crane gang, was that I had been working on that one like for a year and a half, and it that happens to me where my like the way I think and the way I stylize things and the art direction in general did change in my head. So I was like, well, now I gotta readjust and
Mm,
like update everything. And I'm like, you really can't do that for big projects like that because it just adds more time that's unnecessary, you know,
yeah.
when you could have just trusted in the direction of it and just kept going forward with it. So with this one, I'm trying to realize that they're not compromises, but there's some things that I can like just stick to, you know, like I don't have to change it just because I think this idea is better. You know, I could save that idea for the next film.
Mhm. So do you have a like a list or notes of different short films you have
Uh,
in projects?
yeah. So I have this one I'm currently working on. I have the bartender one with the crane gang, and then I had this little mini series that I was working on. It was only supposed to be like 3 episodes, and I
Mhm.
actually ended up doing like a final storyboard for the first episode. Um, but with that one, it ended up becoming part of a larger project. So I probably didn't need to do that, but I just felt like the right move. So I ended up making
Yeah.
it part of a bigger project.
Is it the Forest Guardian?
Oh, yes. So that one, yeah, that one was like a little mini series that I wanted to, but it ended up becoming part of like a bigger series that I've been writing the last 4 years. Because
Okay.
a lot of these stories, like, I guess not like they just feel like they would be part of the same universe. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could just make like a bigger story. And then with these smaller ones, it's just kind of like almost like a pilot, I guess, or not a
Mm,
pilot necessarily, but like just like a little
a part
introduction to the world, I
of the
guess.
universe.
Yeah. Um, but for now, I think it's better just to work on like the standalone project. That way I don't like baby it, you know? Like with the other ones, I'm like, oh, too precious to me. I don't want to
Yeah.
like change too much or like I don't want to deviate. Well, with this one, I'm like, not that I'm less connected to it, because I'm having a lot of fun with it and stuff, and I'm still connected to it, but just in the sense that it's like a one-off project, like it's like a standalone film almost, like a
Mhm.
standalone project. So I don't have to worry about like, will this connect to the overall story, or does it make sense for them to be doing this in this world, you know? So this one, I can just, there's a little more freedom with this one
Yeah.
that the other projects don't have.
And when you make animatics, do you make them in one Callipeg file, or do you make several shots? Because I know that I like to have everything in the same file.
Um, so so when I'm doing the animations, I'll break them up into the individual shots, and then when I'm putting them together, I'll just do that in the compositing program because that way I can just kind of like move them around and like add the sound effects quickly and just kind of do some like basic little editing tricks just to like
Mhm.
kind of see how it plays out. Um, and then, but usually what makes it easier is that I group them in the scenes in Callipeg, so I could just kind of like export them all out at the same time. So it's already kind of like organized for me and all that.
And all smaller projects like this, I mean smaller solo projects or two people projects, it's way easier to just make things again and just go back and forth, different steps. We can also skip some steps. For example, some small project doesn't have a pausing layout into the animation. We just go to animation straight. So it really depends, but being a small team is also an advantage in the time you take to make things quicker.
Yeah, I guess there's some things I like about it better because like I know that if I was in an actual production, some of those things wouldn't fly. But
Mm,
I guess that's the advantage of like doing your own passion projects with your crew is that you can dictate like how long certain aspects of it take to
mm.
do. Uh, and so that, it gives a little more freedom to the project. You know, it's a little less restrictive for sure.
And also no deadline, which is also a problem sometimes.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, it's more of a practical question. But since Callipeg and the iPad just very mobile, very little, where do you work usually? Do you have a desk? Do you work from the couch, or I don't know?
Yeah, so when we're home, we have desks that we work on, and then we'll have the computer set up so that way we can have like references up and stuff.
Mhm.
But when we're on the go, it's just wherever we can set up. So like sometimes it's just the couch, which I like that we can just animate on the couch. Um, Sometimes it's a kitchen table.
Mhm.
Pretty much wherever we have a seat where we can animate on the go, works out. But yeah, when we're home, we have like a dedicated desk area.
Yeah, because we can easily get caught into the easiness of just being on the couch in the bed, or I don't know, and then it's not good for the overall health of the back and so on. So as animators, we have to focus on that also, the wrists, having a proper board and so on. So it can need quite a setup also, just to be comfortable when you work extendedly on an iPad also.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why we even like even just getting the right chairs like
Mm.
makes the difference between like your back hurting after animating for like long periods of time and not. So like that's why like when we're home at least like we made sure to have like a dedicated area to do the animation because I did used to just do it like sitting on the bed or like just sitting on like a regular chair or something. But um, yeah, when you do it for that long, it definitely not comfortable in the back. So
Mm.
it's always nice to have the dedicated area. So it's like a mix of like storyboards, rough, like some rough animation and animatics. So it's like all over the place stylistically, but it was just to see like the basic rundown. But
Mhm.
it starts a little different now. That's why like this is an older version. I think this is from like a few months ago, like maybe like 3, 4 months ago. But it has more Callipeg animation, so just to give more of a feel for how we would use it.
So you don't always do some backgrounds. Sometimes it's just
Sometimes
blank.
for the rougher one, like I don't have too much of a layout, so
Mhm.
that's been an issue with older projects. So that's why going forward, especially with this one later on, because this is from like maybe 5 months ago. Um uh yeah, I try to make sure to add more like layouts and stuff so it's more like readable. But that was kind of an issue. Sometimes they don't have
Mm.
the backgrounds. But yeah, it's a little more rough. It's a little more, and some of it's just screen recordings of like an older version, just to see how the overall like film would play out.
And even though we can't hear it here, does it have a sound already? Or you're planning also a bit of sound design?
So for not this one, but one of the newer ones, yeah, I usually like to do some sound design. That way I can kind of like hear it out and stuff. But
Mhm.
think for this one, there was no real sound design because I knew that I wanted to like go over and like do some like newer storyboards. The parts that are screen recorded are from like the older project. I was just piecing it all together with the storyboards I had, with
Mhm.
some new rough animation I did, with the old parts, and just kind of hodgepodging it to see like, okay, what works, what doesn't, what am I gonna keep, what am I gonna disregard in the newer version. So this was just like a testing ground for it before like I committed to like a new storyboard with like
Yeah.
more readable drawings and better layouts and just like more more breathing points too because like with this one it was just mostly action with no like moments of like just like calming down and like taking in the moment. So a lot of this was to just see, okay, where do I add those like breaks to the project? And then with the current version, it's around like 5, 6 minutes now, just because I added more breaks to it and like more moments of dialogue where people can just kind of take in what they saw. Whereas
Mhm.
this one was just kind of like action, action, action with no real like
Yeah.
pause. So these are the current character designs for for the characters. So the one on the left is, I would say, the antagonist of the film.
Mhm.
The one in the middle would be the protagonist, and then the one on the right is more like a side character.
And how do you think about the design for animation specifically? What do you simplify? What do you add to make it animatable?
Um, so the number one thing is like big shapes, like just like playing with those big shapes. So like he's basically just a circle. He's like a
Mhm.
rectangle almost, or like a triangle, and then he's square. Um, and so just like playing with those like basic shapes and like trying to like really simplify, but like add enough detail. So like there's still detail in the jacket and
Mhm.
like there's still like the eyelashes and like the nail detail. So there's still detail to have fun with, but like the overall shapes is what makes it more manageable when like animating and like simplifying and stuff. And then just like um just like reoccurring shapes too. That's like an
Mhm.
easy way to add like pizzazz to it, but like still keeping it more toned down. Because like I feel like if these characters were more detailed, it would take us way longer.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like it has a good balance between detail, but like
And animating the dots on the shoulders, on the nose is already kind of difficult to make it consistent. So there is details, as you say. There is enough details to not go crazy when animating, but having a challenge.
Oh yeah. Like just finding that balance is always fun too, because I'm like, I don't want to make it so simple that it's kind of boring. Like I do like the challenge of like um, playing around with like all these like secondary details. And then this is like his final. This is an older design of the final form, but this is essentially his final form. Like when he like mutates after drinking most of the cola.
Even if it's a cartoon, you can see it's scary.
Yeah,
I can
so
also imagine the sound being really organic and so on.
yeah, especially when he's
Mm.
blinking.
Yeah, and so also it's a nice challenge for animation because it's a shape like you would have it's kind of a gorilla style for the
Yeah,
hand
like a gorilla
walking,
almost.
and also the weight of the legs being carried on. So I can imagine the balance of that.
Yeah,
It would be nice
definitely
to animate.
gorilla inspiration. I thought that'd be fun because the way they run is really like interesting. So I was like,
Hmm.
that'd be like a cool thing to play around, especially with like how like mutated he is. Like
Yeah,
it's like a fun little thing to add.
and some wide angles when it's all deformed and you can see it approaching the camera. I can imagine many different kind of movement with that design.
Definitely playing with those eyes a lot too, like looking
Hmm.
everywhere and yeah,
Yeah.
his character is pretty chaotic, so we just wanted to represent that with like this chaotic design. And then for the brother in the middle, his power is actually to make clones.
Okay.
So he's able to like transform his clones. So this is one of them is like a sword almost. He can like take his clones and transform them into like different like weapons and stuff.
Wow.
So that's one of them. It's an earlier design. It's still a work in progress, but just to give an idea of like how it would look, and then just color too. We just try to find fun, interesting colors to like separate them.
Yeah. Making them the same family with the shapes and so on, but not too similar. I think it works well. Maybe you have a final thing, a final thought to share. Maybe I don't know an advice, something you would have liked to learn before making the mistake itself in your journey.
So that this film has been a learning lesson because with previous films, I got a little too ambitious and I just kept wanting to add more and more things. But with this one, it's made me realize that I don't have to put every idea I have in my head into this one film. I
Mm.
could save it for other projects. Um, that's probably one of my biggest takeaways from this is that you should just not compromise, but just kind of like be happy with the choices you made because even if it's not perfect, uh, I mean, you could just take everything you learned from this one and like make the next one even better, you know? And like just making it and like feeling like is rewarding too, you know, because you want it to be perfect, so you're just focusing on like doing like you're just focusing on work focus aspects of the animation and just like taking away from the fun of it, which is like creating these worlds, creating these characters, making these fun fights, like telling these funny jokes, you know, like when you get lost in the work aspect, like, oh, I could have made this scene more technically better, or like, oh, this character could have been more like pushed. It's like, yeah, I probably could have, but you know, like you should have just enjoyed just creating it, you know,
Mhm.
and just like learning from it, you know. So this one, I'm really learning to just like be happy with the choices I'm making, know that I can just like bring it into the next project and yeah, just make a lot of cool things because it's stopped me from making cool projects before that I was like this is one of them. Like it stopped me from making this one and now I'm finally back at it and I'm like, no, I should have been confident with it. So yeah, just learning that has helped a lot. And then yeah, just not you know, write the story before you or don't write the story but just have a good idea of how it's gonna start and end that way you're not like constantly adding to it and like just giving
Mhm.
yourself more work because there's been other projects where I'll be animating the scene for a month and then I'll be like I don't need the scene anymore, it doesn't work with the
Yeah.
overall story. And so if I would have just focused on actually writing the story more and like dedicating that time to that aspect of the animation, then I wouldn't have wasted a month of time. Just planning things out better too, like just like properly planning things. Because animation is a lot of moving parts and a lot of like aspects to it. And if it's not planned out properly, you're giving yourself more work than you need to.
Yeah, I would say that pre-production is one of the biggest key. You just write, you storyboard. You can go back and forth between writing, storyboarding, design, even more on a solo or a small team project. But don't write when you're animating, because animation is already just we do that, we go for it, and then we just have to deal with the challenges of animation, of texturing, of shadow, of lighting, of everything. So yeah, that's a big issue that you can have when you don't plan correctly. So that's a nice advice. Thanks a lot for sharing all your inspiration and animation process and so on. I will put some links to your work in the description so people can see what you do in animation, illustration, and so on. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.